healthy. When he was healthy and on the field, he can make plays happen. What's Mazio Bennett going to be like in year number 2? There's still a fair amount of uncertainty in that wide receiver room that I could see giving a lot of people pause. Again, going back to why I thought Sellers might only be like second team preseason All-SEC as opposed to first team because of these questions. And then you go to the offensive line, which, again, last year, not great. Got better, technically speaking, at the end of the year, but I think more of that was on the North Sellers. And look, these past couple of years have not been great for the offensive line. It's offensive lines at South Carolina, and you hope that this year is leaps and bounds better. You are replacing pretty much your entire interior on that offensive line based on what we think we know right now in terms of projections of depth charts and those kind of things, because you don't have depth charts yet. Coach, don't get mad at me for that. We don't have a depth chart yet. But what we think the starting five will look like, you're replacing a lot of who you did have from a season ago. So he's definitely facing challenges, one of our Sellers is, when it comes to compliments around him on offense. At least where we stand right now, that opinion can obviously change, and I hope it does as the season goes along, being like, wow, Brian Rowe really was that guy that everybody said he was, or, man, Mazio Bennett is flirting with a 1,000-yard season, or, hey, Faison got eligible, and he's out there ripping off long runs left and right. Like, you hope you're saying those things, but as of right now, you certainly do not know, and I would attest that Sellers has the toughest job in terms of what he's going to be asked to do out of all three of those quarterbacks that made the respective SEC preseason teams. Looking at Garrett Nussmeier, who, again, I think is seen by most as like the most pro-ready quarterback out of this group based on what we've seen so far. His ability, his arm strength, all those kind of things. If he went first overall next year, I would not be the least bit surprised by it. But he's going to be returning 2 of his top 3 rushers from a year ago. Now, this LSU team did struggle to run the ball, so that's not a given that somebody's going to go out there and pop off, 1,000 yards or something like that. But you do have continuity with a couple of those guys returning for another year. You got Aaron Anderson, the leading wide receiver that plays in the slot, coming back from a year ago. They had a Barrion Brown, who's a big play guy when he was at Kentucky, to that wide receiver core, somebody that you can move around to a lot of different places, light him up out wide, put him in the slot, those kind of things. A little bit of pause when it comes to the offensive line because they are replacing 4 of their offensive line starters. But LSU's typically a place where the offensive line play is really good, so you kind of assume that that's going to continue to be the case this upcoming season. So a solid situation, I would say, that Nussmeier is being handed going into his final year as starter out there at LSU. And then Arch Manning. Of course, I think Arch Manning gets into being the third-team quarterback based purely off the upside because, again, we've not seen enough of him to truly know what he's going to be. Name carries a lot of cachet, though, and it was not surprising that he did indeed end up on this list. He's got perhaps one of the, if not the best running backs in all of college football in Quintavious Wisner, returning for another year at Texas after running for 1,000 yards last year. He does, lose a couple of, or he does lose the 3 primary pass catchers from that Texas team a year ago. But you have a couple young guys that were 4 and 5 stars coming out of high school, and Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore, that when they got their opportunities last year, made the most of it, come out for 900 yards and 9 touchdowns. So it seems like a natural progression for those guys to kind of step up into those primary receiving roles this upcoming year. Now, they do lose 4 of their stars in the offensive line as well. Again, Texas, very good at offensive line play. They've hit the portal pretty hard there. They've got a lot of combined starts of experience in that group that they're going to be able to whittle down to some kind of starting 5 on the offensive line that, again, you think is still going to be pretty decent, if not just as good as it was a year ago. So every quarterback has some varying degree of concern, right? Whether it be offensive line, maybe losing some targets, those kind of things. But I still think that what Nussmeier and Manning might be concerned about offensively pales in comparison to what Sellers is going to have to deal with here at Carolina, which, again, I think can make what he's doing that much more impressive. When you say, okay, well, maybe he doesn't still have the best offensive line. He doesn't have a 1,000-yard receiver that he can throw the ball to. He doesn't have a running back that's, ripping off 15 and 20-yard carries left and right, those kind of things. Like, he may have to do a lot of the heavy lifting himself, at least early on in the season. And so we kind of figure out what the rest of this team is. And again, I think that can endear him to more people when they see that he's carrying a big bulk of the load, if that does end up being the situation. But again, all three quarterbacks from their respective all-SEC teams are dealing with something. Nobody's going into a perfect situation. In fact, there's really nobody in the conference, I feel like, that's going into a perfect situation in terms of returning and what they have around them and all this kind of stuff. Because again, everything's just so fluid, and with the portal and all these kind of things, there's no not as much continuity and carryover as it's been in years past. And of course, you always lose guys to the NFL and those kind of things that you just can't get those guys back. So it'll be interesting to see how Sellers fares. I believe he can do it. I don't have any doubts that he can do it. And again, he was in my top 3 when it came to voting for all SEC preseason teams. But good to see that the rest of the media does think of him so highly to put him up there at number 1. It is Monday, and as the new tradition on the I almost called it the early game. Look at me, I'm being like Bill. As a new tradition on the halftime show is, coming up next, we're going to dive into heads or tails, my observations of things going on in sports and life over the weekend. What was good, what was bad, and what was maybe in between as well. I'll dive into all that coming up next. It is the halftime show. It's Irad, Captain Dave, along with you on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Monday on the game, flying solo alongside Captain Dave for the week here as Bill Gunter is out taking his last couple of vacation days before football season gets here. So unfortunately, he does have to miss Heads or Tails for this week. If you're new to this, heads are good things, positive things, things that I liked from over the weekend. Tails are negative things or things that I feel like weren't the best from over the weekend in both sports and life. This is not just limited to what happens on the field, court, or anywhere in between. It can be any other aspect of what's going on in the world as well. We'll start off with head number one, that being Scotty Scheffler continuing his run of dominance as he picks up the win at the Open Championship over the weekend out there at Royal Portrush. As that was his fourth major victory in his very young career. What I think I looked up, he's only like 9 days younger than me. So Scotty Scheffler, not even 30 yet, already with 4 major victories. And this is a stat that I saw that crazy, putting things in perspective here, that somebody put out yesterday. This is from Claire Rogers of golf.com. Tiger Woods picked up his first major victory at the 1997 Masters and his 4th major win at the Open in 2000. The difference between those two events was 1,197 days. Scotty Scheffler picked up his first major win at the Masters in 2022. On Sunday, picked up his 4th major win at the Open Championship. The difference between those, the days difference between those two events, 1,197 days. So quite literally, Scotty Scheffler is on a Tiger Woods type of pace when it comes to what he's doing at the top level of golf, which is really, really cool to see. He's a very easy guy to root for. Again, his personality is not the most dynamic, and he's not the most outgoing guy in the world, but he's somebody that loves his family. He's obviously really, really great at golf. I know there was a lot of conversation throughout the week of, him basically saying, hey, winning these tournaments only brings me momentary joy. There's other more important things going on in life that people kind of ran with in a lot of ways. But again, just seems like good dude, great golfer, obviously, and cool to see him continuing to have that success, which I'll get into more about the Scotty Scheffler effect in the world of golf coming up in just a couple minutes after we're done with heads or tails here. Let's get to head number 2. Dave, if I could get cut number 2 here.
High and deep to right. Over toward the line, Acuña's got it. Tagging from second is Bebas. Whoa! They got him! Are you kidding me?
That was on Friday night. The Braves picking up the victory 7-3 of the Yankees in game number 1 back from the All-Star break, and that was in the 3rd inning when Ronald Acuña Jr. from right field was able to gun out Orbit Vivas of the New York Yankees on a double play after he was able to catch the fly ball. Vivas tagging up trying to get to third. Seemingly didn't think that the ball was going to be able to get there in time, which I don't blame him. That's a crazy throw to make on a frozen rope that Ronald Acuña Jr. was able to do, and he seemed very surprised when the ball got there and he got tagged out. He didn't slide. I have to go back and watch the replay. I don't think the third base coach was telling him to get down or anything, and I brought this up to Jack earlier. Nobody was expecting the throw to be that good, right? Just a completely perfect throw. Nacho Alvarez playing third base really didn't have to move at all. Ball goes in his glove. Boom, he turns around, tags him, and he's out. Unfortunately for the Braves, that ended up kind of being one of the few highlights of the actual weekend, though, as they win that game on Friday night, blow a 5-run lead in the second game on Saturday, and then just couldn't get the offense going in game number 3 as they dropped the series 2 games to 1 to the Yankees over the weekend as they continue what's been a struggle of a year, as they the optimism that they could put something together in the back half of the year continues to fall down more and more and more. Right in line with that, though, this would be, I guess, head number 2.5, if not 3 here, and this coming out just in the past couple of hours. But the Braves and the Reds, who are going to be playing in the Speedway Classic, series coming up here in a couple days' time on August 2nd at Bristol have unveiled their uniforms and helmets and hats and stuff that will pay tribute during the Speedway Classic. So a lot of racing-themed things here when it comes to the bats, the helmets, the hats, all those kind of things. I'm looking at Ellie De La Cruz, who's got a nice like checkered design on the side of his helmet, which looks like something you'd wear at a racetrack. So that's pretty neat. Got some flames on the Braves hats, which is cool. I'll definitely have to be buying one of those hats here. You got the checkerboard on the Reds bill, the cap there, which is pretty cool too. So nice to see two of my favorite things collide when it comes to Major League Baseball and the world of NASCAR. Again, that coming up on August the 2nd there. Now we get over to the tails side of things, and this is something that I saw over the weekend that I saw a lot of people misunderstanding in a way. The WNBA All-Star Game happened over the weekend where the players before the game wore the Pay What You Owe Us t-shirts during warm-ups in reference to the collective bargaining agreement that is being negotiated for 2026 and beyond between the Players Association and the league. And I've seen a lot of people that have kind of jumped on this with the wrong idea of kind of what's being done here. And a lot of people jump on, hey, the WNBA lost $40 million last year, and it's a league that doesn't turn revenue, which is very true. They have not been able to turn revenue up to this point. However, they are going into a new television deal next year, which is worth $2.2 billion over the course of 11 years. So that means about $200 million worth of payout for the league the next upcoming year. With the new television deal, that is because of the increased interest the sport's had in the past couple of years. Now, yes, you can say that's all on Caitlin Clark. I don't say it's all on her. A lot of it does have to do with her, but still, she was a player represented by the Players Association, and what the players are essentially saying is, hey, we need a bigger cut of the pie here, because if you did not know, the WNBA's rev share with players is 9%. Which is significantly lower than any other major sport, because Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, and MLB all have revenue shares with their athletes of roughly about 50%. I think the NFL is like 49, 51, but right there around half. And again, the WNBA just really pales comparisons to that. And when you're in a league like that suddenly sees an uptick in interest, as well as the money coming in with the new television deal, as the player, the catalyst for why that's happening, it's understandable why you would want to ask for a bigger cut of the pie. Will they get it? I don't know. Doesn't seem like the negotiations are going too well right now, which is why you had the publicity stunt of wearing the T-shirts for the game on Saturday. But again, I just feel like there's a lot of people out there that didn't quite understand what was being asked here, what was being said here, which is why I kind of wanted to include that in the tails section of this, because I feel like people just need a little more clarification on what exactly is going down here and what exactly the athletes of the WNBA are asking for. And again, we'll see if they get that. I believe October is their deadline to figure out those negotiations for the next year with that new television deal. But again, they're just asking for a bigger cut of the pie when it comes to revenue sharing with their new television deal. And last one here, just for fun, because I did get to enjoy so much free Dr. Pepper last week. None of that this week, unfortunately. I did have to drink a lot of water over the weekend to offset all the Dr. Pepper I drank last week. I did a great job keeping me awake on some of those longer days for SEC Media Days, but unfortunately no more free Dr. Pepper this week. So was fun, enjoyed it, certainly. Appreciate everybody at the College Football Hall of Fame, as well as the SEC for obviously allowing us to be out there, and hopefully can get the opportunity to go back next year and in the years to come there, because that was certainly a lot of fun. I want to get back into Scottie Scheffler and what he means to the world of golf and all of sports as of right now, because I thought about something yesterday watching the last round of the Open, that something happens in golf that we don't see happen in other sports in terms of the dominance, right? I want to dive into that coming up next. It's not the extra point. It's the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, wrapping up hour number 1 here on your Monday on the Game. I mentioned in my heads or tails there about Scotty Scheffler winning the Open Championship and this dominant run that he's been here on the past couple of years, still very young into his golf career. Real quick, cut number 6 here, Dave. Here is Scheffler talking yesterday afterwards about that feeling of winning the Open Championship.
I think so. I mean, being able to walk up 18 with the tournament in hand is a really tough thing to describe. It's a really cool feeling. I have a lot of gratitude towards being able to accomplish something like this. It's taken a lot of work, and not only a lot of work, but it takes a lot of patience. And I mean, it's a high level of focus over 72 holes of a tournament. And this was, I felt like one of my best performances mentally. We did a really good job of staying in it all week. Like I said, to only have one double, or really only one over par hole over the last 36 holes of a major championship is, that's how you're able to win these tournaments, just being able to do stuff like that. And it takes a high level of focus. And, Teddy and I did a really good job this weekend of being committed to what we're doing and, holding some key putts when I needed them.
And, when you look at the rest of the top 10, second, which went to Harris English, through ninth, were all decided by just 3 strokes. You had just this mad dash right there behind Scotty Scheffler, but he ran away with the thing. Ends up winning it by 4 strokes at under 17 for the weekend in a just purely dominant performance. And I had a thought watching yesterday as he's, again, dominating that final round there, that golf might be the one sport where dominance is tolerated the best, right? As I just mentioned, that stat of him from his first major win to his 4th major win, the exact same amount of days as Tiger Woods when he was going on his early run at the turn of the century there, that would continue on for the next handful of years for that, that great era of Tiger golf in the early 2000s that cooled off and then, obviously has had a success in spots since then. But, Tiger was so celebrated for what he was doing. You look at the greats over time of Palmer, Nicklaus, and all those guys, where I feel like when guys dominating golf, it is revered a lot more, right? Because when you compare it to other sports, you can look at the Patriots dynasty. You can look at what Alabama's done in football. The plenty of teams, the Lakers, the Golden State Warriors, Celtics, whoever it may be, that have been at the top of their respective sports for a very long time, consecutive titles, whatever it may be. I'm sure the Braves were the same way back in the 90s when they were consistently finding their way into World Series. That I feel like after a short period of time, we're in the middle of it right now with the Chiefs and what they have going on with 3 straight Super Bowl trips. I feel like pretty quickly the general consensus of people turn on those successful teams because they've become too successful. We don't like seeing the same teams, the same people win over and over and over again, and you start seeing the accusations of cheating, the accusations of favoritism. We're right now in the midst of watching, the league wants the Chiefs to win. The league is giving the Chiefs these favorable calls and all these kind of things. Whether you believe that or not, I'm not here to say one way or the other, but that's what the conversation and the narrative around it is. Golf doesn't seem to be that way. And look, there are plenty of people that didn't like Tiger. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that don't like Scotty Scheffler, but I feel like the consensus overall is that everybody celebrates dominance in golf more than we do in other sports. And maybe it's because it's the fact that it's an individual sport and there's one person doing this as opposed to a team of people or coaches or whatever it may be. And maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Golf is obviously a sport that anybody can pick up and go play on a random Monday if they want to. So maybe there's an appreciation for the minute details of the game that, unfortunately, we can't all just go out there and play tackle football every single day, or a fully put together baseball game or something along those lines. So maybe there's an appreciation for what goes into being a great golfer because a lot of people do it on more of an amateur level than those other sports. I don't know what it is, but that's something that I just kind of thought about over the weekend. Watching Scheffler dominate at the Open is like, man, we're witnessing the next great golfer. right? This next generational type of run that I think we're going to be talking about for years and years after the fact, and whatever Scheffler's career ends up being. And I don't see a lot of people being negative about it. And maybe I'm not looking at the right area of golf Twitter or something along those lines, but I feel like it is being celebrated by everyone right now. Like, man, I can't believe, look what this guy's doing. He's being compared to Tiger and all these kind of things. He's likely not going to move the needle as much as Tiger. Again, golf always wants to have that next superstar that's going to bring in casual eyes, bring in, viewership. And I don't think Scheffler's that guy. From a personality standpoint, he's not. The success on the golf course can only move the needle so much. But from a success standpoint, he certainly looks like he's going to have a career that's going to be talked about among the all-time greats if he continues on the path that he's on right now, because there's no doubt about it. He is the best golfer in the world, and I reaffirmed that once again on Sunday with his victory in the Open Championship. We'll turn our attention back to college football coming up next. Pete Nakos put out his list of teams with the easiest and the hardest non-conference schedules in 2025. Who's on that list and what exactly does it mean for their playoff hopes? We'll dive into that coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head, Captain Dave on the other side of the glass. 1 hour down, 2 more hours to go on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Ed, Cap and Dave on the other side of the glass here on your Monday on the game. Oh, just a little over a month until we see college football make its triumphant return against South Carolina, 41 days away from kicking things off against Virginia Tech, and we're only 33 days away from week number 0 if you're somebody that believes in that. Pete Nakos of On3 over the weekend put out an article highlighting what he deemed to be the toughest and the easiest non-conference schedules in all of college football. And I want to highlight a couple of different teams here. And strength of schedule is important in a lot of different ways. If you're one of the better teams in college football, strength of schedule is a major, major data point when it comes to potentially making the college football playoff. Because, again, if you have a tough strength of schedule, then, your win-loss is weighted more heavily. If you have a weaker strength of schedule, not so much. If you're a coach that's on the hot seat and trying to save your job, the amount of wins that you have could quite literally be the difference between you getting fired and you being retained for another season. And again, not every schedule is made the same. Not every conference is made the same. But one thing you do have control of as a school, as a university, is who you schedule out of conference. That is up to you. You go out there, you make these contracts, make these deals with these other teams, whether it be from the G5 level, FCS level, or another Power 4 level, to craft what your schedule is going to be typically years down the line. We always make the joke that, you get a game scheduled for 2038 in 2035, and you do the math like, oh, well, the freshmen in that game are like 5 or 6 years old right now. But that's kind of the nature of the beast in terms of how scheduling in college football works. And I give credit to South Carolina because, these past couple of years especially, they have not been afraid to go out and schedule what they deem to be quality competition from other Power 4 leagues, namely the ACC. 2 years ago, they obviously opened up the season against North Carolina up there in Charlotte. Lost that game, unfortunately. And you're seeing something similar this upcoming year with them scheduling Virginia Tech. And then, of course, you always have the Clemson game at the end of the regular season. So Carolina is committing itself to playing 10 Power 4 games in the regular season, even though the SEC only requires one in terms of your outer conference schedule, which is already going to be done every single year with the with the Clemson game. So Carolina has tried its best. Again, Virginia Tech not the strongest team in the ACC as of right now. So Carolina does not appear on this list when it comes to toughest non-conference schedules, but Clemson does. And I think a lot of why that is because of the way South Carolina is perceived going into the season. Again, we talked about earlier, they are number 5 in the SEC preseason media poll. They're likely going to be somewhere, right into the top 15 when the AP poll comes out prior to the season. Sellers, again, a Heisman hopeful, potential first-round draft pick. Dylan Stewart thought of as one of the best at his respective position going to year number 2. So they are thought of as a strong team on a lot of counts, which I think goes a long way in why Clemson is being, put in this list as having one of the tougher non-con schedules, in addition to the fact that they play host to LSU in week number 1. That's a huge game. That might be one of the biggest games of the entire weekend across the landscape of college football when it comes to the two teams that call Death Valley home, and LSU and Clemson squaring off with each other. Now, outside of that, Clemson does schedule Troy and Furman as their other two non-conference games, one of those being a G5 and one of those being FCS, obviously. But a lot of heavy lifting being done with the South Carolina game and the LSU game in terms of what Clemson has on their schedule. And I think it's significant, especially when you look at last year, how valuable that can be for a team like Clemson that, look, I think they're legitimately one of the most talented and loaded teams in the entire country. I don't think they're going to have to worry about impressing the committee when it comes to getting in, because I think they're likely going to win the ACC again, where that's kind of a moot point. But if something happens and say they come up short, lose the conference championship game, or don't make it in for whatever reason, I think having that strong strength of schedule, let's say if they're able to beat LSU and maybe lose to South Carolina, is enough to, I think, potentially bolster them of getting in if it works out well enough and they have enough of the wins to back things up. Because as we know in the ACC, you're not going to get quite the benefit of the doubt that you do in the SEC or the Big Ten in terms of your overall strength of schedule because the league itself is not as strong from top to bottom. Sticking in the ACC, Syracuse as well, also challenging themselves in the non-conference slate, taking on Tennessee. That'll actually be the day before South Carolina Virginia Tech square off in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the Athletic kickoff game. And then as a part of the agreement with the ACC, of course, Notre Dame plays a select number of ACC teams every single year. This year is going to include Syracuse. That does count as a non-conference game. So Fran Brown in year number 2, and we love our guy Fran Brown. He is becoming a little bit of a very quotable coach in a short time at the helm in college football. But they are also challenging themselves when it comes to the non-conference slate in terms of having Tennessee, Notre Dame. They do have UConn and Colgate as their two non-conference, as their two non-power opponents, which again, those are bye games you're supposed to win pretty easily, tune-up games, whatever you want to call them. And man, if they can back up the strong campaign they had last year, they went 8-4 in the regular season, I believe. Especially if they are able to get those 2 games against Tennessee and Notre Dame, you could be talking about a Syracuse team that could be positioning itself for the college football playoff in year number 2 there under Fran Brown. Elsewhere on the list of toughest non-conference schedules per Pete Naco Spawn 3, you have the Florida Gators. Now, LIU Brooklyn, I believe that's who that first team is not one of those teams making that possible on the list. But they play pretty much the Florida State Championship round after that, where they will take on Miami, South Florida, and Florida State throughout the course of the rest of the season. Now, Miami is thought to be the best out of that group. Of course, we figured Florida State was going to be really good last year, but by the time they got into the Florida game, they were 2-9 and just kind of limped to the end there by losing to Florida to round out the regular season. But anticipate they should be somewhat better than they were a year ago. That's obviously a very, very low bar to ultimately clear. But one team that I feel like you do have to worry about, a little bit tricky here, South Florida. I know you may not think much of South Florida, but Alex Golesh has done a really good job in 2 seasons there. Both times they've gone 7-6 on the heels of being 1-11 back in 2022. He has turned that program around really, really quickly. And let's go back over the course of the past couple of years. South Florida has given Alabama trouble. Remember that weird game in 2023 down there in Tampa that Alabama barely escaped with the win? Last year, it was a tight game with about 8 to 10 minutes to go before Alabama really opened it up in those final couple minutes. That's a tricky team. Now, I don't know how much that's going to bolster the resume of Florida, if Florida's good enough to be in conversation for the college football playoff, but that is a game you cannot overlook. That is a tricky G5 team out of what is now known as the American. If you didn't catch that earlier, the American Athletic Conference has dropped the athletic part from their name, but South Florida, not a team to overlook. That I think adds a lot to why Florida's schedule is tough this year. Obviously, with what they play in conference and then playing those 4 respective teams out of conference, that could be good or bad. Because if they're able to survive that schedule, and let's say they go 8-4 or something along those lines, then people could say, "Wow, look at Billy saving off, getting fired again by performing this well against a tough slate and a tough schedule." Where if they end up losing, and end up being under 500 or something along those lines, then Billy Napier's probably gone. But we'll see what happens there. Stick in the state of Florida and go to their rival now with another team I want to highlight off this list of teams with the toughest non-conference slate, that being Florida State. And no team is hanging on more to single wins or single losses this upcoming season than the Florida State Seminoles. Again, nobody expected them to be as atrociously bad as they were a year ago, going 2-10, but that's indeed what ended up happening. And this upcoming year, they need every single win that they can get. But they have probably done themselves no favors when it comes to what their out-of-conference scheduling is. If you have not heard, they're starting off the season playing host to Alabama down there in Tallahassee. Thomas Castellanos, the new quarterback for Florida State, has already riled up the Crimson Tide with his assessment that, Nick Saban's not there anymore. How scary can they be? Deontay Lawson, the linebacker for Alabama, did note last week that, hey, we heard him, and disrespect will be dealt with accordingly. So we'll all see how that ends up going down there in week number 1. But aside from that, They have East Texas A&M, not a problem. Kent State, not a problem, or at least shouldn't be. I guess with the struggles they had last year, nothing's off the table in terms of teams that they could potentially lose to this upcoming year. And then they end the year against the Florida Gators. And I'll get into this a little bit later on in the show. I'm getting a lot more optimistic about what Florida is going to be this year, and I'll tell you why. It revolves a lot around DJ Lagway later on in the show. But that could be another very, very challenging game for Florida State. And again, Norvell, buyout's big. Last year, 2-10 season, obviously didn't fire him after that. But, man, you have another year where you're maybe not making a bowl game, then Norvell could certainly be looking for a job the next upcoming offseason. And, again, the ACC slate, not the most challenging in terms of toughest schedules in the entire country, but again, where every single win and loss counts and matters so much for a team like Florida State, having those challenges of Alabama and potentially Florida on their schedule could serve tricky and could potentially be what keeps them out if they are stronger again, like they were 2 years ago, of maybe not making the college football playoff if they come up short in both those contests. So we will certainly have to see on that. So that's your toughest non-conference schedules. What about the easiest non-conference schedules? There's some notable names in here on this list that have done a good job of making sure they're going to have as many wins as possible that could potentially bolster their own resumes when it comes to the college football playoff. I will get into that coming up next. It is the halftime show. It's Outerhead and Captain Dave along with you on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Captain Dave along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Reminder, coming up on Thursday, post-game show with Jay and Terry going to be live from the Nest at 1331 Gadsden Street, which is right down the street from us here in the Vista. I got a chance to go to the Nest just a couple weeks ago when Terry and I were doing the halftime show from there. Very cool place. A lot of great appliances and stuff like that. There, we're quite literally sitting in a model of kitchens, different kitchen appliances, stuff like that, doing our show. So certainly go by and see those guys, hang out, and again, see what all the great stuff the Nest has to offer over there at 1331 Gadsden for the postgame show coming up Thursday from 3 until 6. Going over this list of Pete Nakos's toughest and easiest non-conference schedules in college football for 2025, kind of ran through some of the toughest ones there, notable teams that really kind of stuck out to me. There are other teams that he put on the list like Duke and Baylor, Miami, TCU, teams like that, Tulane as well, that are going to have some challenging schedules this upcoming year that could go a long way in potentially helping a team make the college football playoff, helping a team miss the college football playoff, helping a coach save his job, or helping a coach potentially get fired, depending on which way all those respective school seasons do end up going. And now we get to the easiest non-conference slates of the entire season, and very SEC heavy on here. And I'll remind you once again, the SEC does have a rule, and this came up a lot last week in terms of the way that scheduling works in the SEC in the debate between 8 and 9 games, that the SEC requires you as a member institution to play at least one Power 5 school outside of the conference slate. Now, a lot of teams like South Carolina and Georgia and Florida have that built in, Kentucky as well, with their respective rivals that preside in the ACC, and some schools like South Carolina will opt to go out and challenge themselves even more by adding another power school to that slate like they're doing with Virginia Tech this upcoming season. This year, though, not quite the case for some other teams in the SEC. And going back to last week's debate with the 8 or 9 game conference schedule that is continuing to rage on as we potentially enter a new playoff model coming up in 2026, you know, with the way things stand as of right now, and the argument being made by Sankey and others with the SEC that, hey, you know, wins and losses apparently mean a whole lot to this committee. We're potentially hurting ourselves by adding another loss for half the teams in our league if we went to a theoretical 9th game. In the same spirit of that, and again, these things were scheduled years back, so nobody knew what the criteria for the playoff committee was going to be once we got to that point. But you have a couple teams in the SEC that are positioning themselves well in terms of almost guaranteeing themselves to be relatively unscathed in their conference slate or non-conference slate compared to some of their counterparts in the SEC. And I'll start off with Georgia. Georgia being projected as the second best team in the SEC this year, will likely be a top 5 team in the AP poll when the season does get started. Not too much of a challenge in the non-conference slate outside of Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech is a team that, of course, took them to the limit last year in that crazy 8 overtime thriller out there in Athens. But outside of that, they play Marshall in week 1, they play Austin Peay, and they play Charlotte. None of those teams really feel like you're going to have too much of a challenge when it comes to Georgia. And when you're a team like that, I kind of group them in the same way with like Alabama's of years past, what we have with Texas and Ohio State. You want to see those teams play high-profile non-conference games in those first couple of weeks of the season, whether it be at a neutral site like Atlanta or Charlotte, or have a home-and-home with somebody. And Georgia does do that. I'm not saying that they don't. They played the non-conference opener against Clemson last year in week number 1 up there in Atlanta. But for them this year, that seems like 3 pretty guaranteed wins, and then we'll see what happens with with Georgia Tech in that 4th game, and then of course they have to obviously make their way through their respective conference slate as well to see what's going to end up happening there. Ole Miss, another team that again just narrowly missed out on the college football playoff last year. They've got kind of an interesting nugget when it comes to their non-conference slate, because again, these games were scheduled years and years back. So nobody could have foreseen the demise of the Pac-12 over the course of time, which has now essentially been dead in the way that we know it, going on its second year. They have Washington State on their non-conference slate. Wazoo, who's technically referred to as a power team right now because of the grandfather rule, is anything but that in the eyes of many people. So that checks the box for Ole Miss when it comes to satisfying their power non-conference opponent. Outside of that, they have Georgia State. They have the Citadel. They also have Tulane. Tulane is a pretty good G5 team. We've seen them in recent years in the Cotton Bowl and stuff like that. So don't sleep on that. But Ole Miss kind of getting a little bit of a break there in terms of having to play a Washington State team, that is technically Power 5, but not really Power 5, to be able to check the box for that. But again, these are all 4 games that I expect them to likely win when it comes to playing non-conference teams. Missouri, another team that the past couple years has won double-digit games. Now, like last year, that 10th win did come in the bowl game, so they did not put themselves in position to make the college football playoff. But even as a 9-3 team, they were not in that same realm as South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama because their schedule was significantly weaker. And when they played the better teams, which included A&M, which included Alabama, and which included South Carolina, they got beaten, and in some of those games pretty thoroughly, by the likes of Alabama and the likes of Texas A&M. But this year, they are playing the same teams because the schedule doesn't change. So Carolina, Bama, and A&M are all their toughest games in the SEC, but their non-conference slate is significantly easier. They play Kansas, who's coming off of a bad season last year. They play Central Arkansas, Louisiana, and UMass. I fully expect them to be able to navigate their way through those 4 games without much of an issue. And again, if they can manage to win one of the 3 games against Carolina, Bama, and Tennessee and beat all the other teams, you could be looking at a 10-win Missouri team that, again, in my opinion, I think regardless of how tough or weak your schedule is in the SEC, you're a 10-win team, you're probably going to get in. So they may have the theoretical easiest path to the playoff of anybody in the SEC. Again, that's casting way down the road, so a lot of football to be played between now and then. But if they can be as good as they were a year ago, they could potentially find themselves in an advantageous spot because of how easy their non-conference slate is. A couple other teams, I'll go outside of the SEC here, but it's worth noting because both these teams we expect to be in the conversation for the college football playoff. How about Penn State? Penn State, as many people expect to be the favorite to win the Big Ten this upcoming year. Now, again, they're going to have their own challenges within season from their respective slate of taking on Big Ten teams. And, of course, James Franklin does have to finally get over that hump of not being able to beat teams in the top 10 when it comes to, playing in the regular season, which this year they do have to take on Oregon and Ohio State. So 2 tough challenges there, but they're definitely not putting themselves in too harmful of a spot when it comes to their non-conference slate with Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. All 3 of those start the season before they take on the Ducks in week number 5 to start their Big Ten slate. But again, we fully expect, as they often are, to be around that 10-2 to 11-1 and being in the mix for the college ball playoff. They're certainly, if they don't win the Big Ten championship, relying on the strength of their Big Ten schedule to bolster their resume as opposed to playing that out of conference slate. And then another team, kind of the story of the offseason when it comes to building rosters, NIL, and all those kind of things, Texas Tech, who, of course, is being funded by oil billionaire Cody Campbell, former player for Mike Leach with the Red Raiders. They've not exactly challenged themselves with their non-conference slate either, taking on Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State, who, like Wazoo, is a Power 5 school, but not really a Power 5 school. So they have an easier path, seemingly, when it comes to their non-conference slate, as they'll have to navigate through the chaos that is the Big 12, which I expect to be fully wide open once again. But, again, for a team that we expect to be really good based on what they've acquired in the offseason with transfer portal and NIL acquisitions and all those kind of things. They've made it easy on themselves when it comes to they play out of conference before getting in to that Big 12 slate that, again, I feel like is very wide open. tough games against BYU, Kansas State, Houston, Utah, all that kind of stuff is certainly going to be a tough road to navigate for Texas Tech. But again, they're making sure they don't have any hurdles too much to get over in the non-conference slate, which they all play 3 weeks in a row before they get into playing serious Big 12 competition late in September. So that's a look at some of the easiest and toughest non-conference slates in college football. Again, we'll see how much those kind of things factor in when December rolls around. We're really comparing resumes of teams, of who should get in, who should get out. And I think you have to look at a team like Penn State, a team like Indiana as well. I forgot to mention them, Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State as their as their teams in the non-conference slate. And Texas Tech, that if they're not a conference champion, and if they have a couple losses in conference, and we're talking about these teams being, 10-2 or 9-3, not having a strong enough non-conference slate could potentially hurt them in terms of maybe being selected for the college football playoff. Again, that's hypothetical. A lot of football to be played between now and then, but something to keep your eye on, because that could end up being something that could prevent one or a couple of these teams from making the playoff if their strength of schedule is not deemed to be strong enough. So we'll certainly have to see. Coming up on August the 5th, the SEC Network documentary series, SEC Any Given Saturday, releases on Netflix. It's going to be an interesting look into the world of the SEC from the 2024 season. We'll dive into that, and let's hear the trailer coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. It's Irad, Captain Dave, on your Monday on the Game. Halftime show, Tyler Head flying solo alongside Captain Dave here on your Monday on the game. Again, Bill will be out all week. We'll get him back in here next week, as by then we'll be 34 days away from South Carolina kicking things off against Virginia Tech in week number 1 out there in Atlanta. And as we navigate these last couple weeks before we get into the college football season, something to help you kind of bridge that gap on the way on August 5th, SEC, any given Saturday. And this kind of got lost in the shuffle last week as we were out at Media Days. But here's a little snippet from the trailer.
Now, as a little boy, teachers would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd say college football player.
The SEC is the greatest place in the world to play college football.
It's the SEC teams who are winning the national championship.
There's such small towns, maybe there's 30,000. But then you pull up to the stadium and there's 90,000 people.
If you play in this league, you will walk into the light.
Every kid in this state grew up dreaming to play for one of the universities.
Florida, Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, LSU, all these teams are wrapped in the fabric of those communities.
I have my life, mortgage, and everything associated with these 18 to 21-year-olds. What, am I crazy?
Each game feels like a Super Bowl for these teams.
It's a brotherhood here.
You get your ass up and finish. Finish. Take what you want.
How crazy would that have been?
My first Florida game. It's a real moment. There's been a lot of expectations.
Garrett Nussmeier is going to have a draft decision to make.
I don't really know what the future is.
The way Diego approaches his work inspired me.
The only place in the SEC that's not hard to play is Vanderbilt.
I heard that. That fuels me.
Whenever something goes bad,
I can either feel sorry for myself or I can embrace it, attack it. I still got a job to do.
This is the biggest game in a generation.
One huge win can change your life.
This is my last chance, and I won't be denied.
Whew, I don't know about you, Dave. Does that make you want to run through a wall?
No.
No? What would make you want to run through a wall?
If I had a chance to play Clemson and crush them to death.
Ah, well, of course. So if I gave you the opportunity to suit up for the Palmetto Bowl and would you give the locker room speech? Would you give the fiery and passion speech before that game?
Oh, sure.
What position are you playing, by the way?
Let's see. I'd probably play defensive end.
Okay. So you want to sack K. Klubnik?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fair.
But then we're talking about a different, I mean, not at me right now at 69 years old. And
in your prime.
What'd you say?
I said in your prime is what we're talking about.
Well, even then, we'd have to add a few talents.
How tall are you?
How tall?
Yeah.
Today, 5'9".
Okay. I don't know if edge would be the best position for you. Maybe DB, perhaps, or like a slot receiver. I don't know. We'd find a way to get you on the field.
He was good in the 6th grade.
Oh, yeah, totally. I believe you. Either way, though, that was the SEC Any Given Saturday Netflix trailer that dropped last week. Again, we were at Media Day, so that kind of got lost in the shuffle. I believe they had an advanced screening of this, by the way, last week. I didn't get a chance to go to that, but nevertheless, very cool. And again, makes you want to run through a wall when you hear that. Teams featured in this, per the cover, LSU, Florida, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Auburn. I do remember when this was announced a while back that there was going to be no Texas, no Georgia. Of course, the two teams ended up playing for the conference championship last year. And essentially, the teams featured in this, like the Netflix crew's embedded with them, right? Following them. I don't know if it's going to be every single game, but for select games and getting the locker room stuff, the behind the scenes stuff. You heard a clip from Coach Beamer in there talking in the locker room. Debo Williams there at the very end talking about being his last chance. So South Carolina going to be a very featured part of this series, which I think would be cool to see. Now again, there's probably gonna be a lot of features on guys that are not here anymore, like those guys that got drafted, this past spring. But nevertheless, cool to see South Carolina being as a featured team on this. And I think Netflix does a really good job with with the documentary type of series, if you've ever watched Drive to Survive, which follows Formula One, Full Swing, which follows the golf tour, and all those kind of things, it's really, really in depth and insightful, and really it takes you into the lives of the respective athletes, right? And that's something that I feel like, especially now in the NIL era of college, I think we're interested to see, right? I think we could all basically get an idea of what it was like to be a college athlete, living the day-to-day life of a student a handful of years ago. But now these guys are in much different spots. A lot of them have have their own condos and drive nice cars and these kind of things, and they are professional athletes to a degree. So I'd really enjoy getting to see a little bit more behind the scenes of what the life of a college athlete is like now compared to what it was, just a handful of years ago. And again, the Netflix series seems to allow the opportunity to take a little bit of a look deeper into that, which I'm certainly excited to see. And I don't know how many episodes it is or how long it's going to take it to get through that, but that's something you can at least look forward to that's going to help you kind of bridge that gap between where we are right now and obviously the beginning of the football season. Though, technically speaking, I can say there's football being played next week. Next Thursday is the NFL Hall of Fame game between the Chargers and the Lions. Again, the Hall of Fame game, I think we all put it on as background noise because, hey, it's football, and you're likely watching guys that are just trying to make the team at the end of the day, not necessarily guys that you expect to be big factors in the NFL, certainly not this upcoming season, but it's the celebration, the return to football, and especially this year, with Sterling Sharp, getting the opportunity to go into the NFL Hall of Fame. I think it'll be even more special for folks locally here at South Carolina, seeing all that go down. But once we hit that, we have NFL preseason games getting rolling the week after that in full force. All the teams across the league taking part in that, and then a couple weeks later, boom, we're straight into college football. So cool to see. Excited for it. It's been a long, busy summer in a lot of ways, but man, can't wait for football to get here. And I think watching the Netflix series will be kind of that last opportunity to really get those juices flowing and get you extra excited as you relive what 2024 was. Look at 2025, though I guess, and depending on what games they choose to highlight for South Carolina, you might have to relive some of those painful games like loss to LSU, coming close against Alabama, just getting obviously run over by Ole Miss, and maybe the bowl game too. I don't know. Maybe we'll get more detail, more background on what happened in the bowl game between South Carolina and Illinois. But I don't know. We'll see. But very cool to see, and excited to see South Carolina featured in that new Netflix series. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. Dave Portnoy is headed to Fox Sports to be a part of Big Noon Kickoff. Is it going to accomplish what Fox wants it to accomplish? I'm not so sure. I'll tell you why coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Tyler Head along with you, Captain Dave, on the other side of the glass. Wrapping up hour number 2 of the extra point. It's not the extra point. Dang it, Dave. We need the jar. We need to get the jar out so I can put in money for getting the name wrong, because we make fun of Bill for doing it, but I'm doing it too.
Sure. Where's the money go? Does it go to me?
Should it go to you?
Sure.
What's your case?
I need money.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we'll get the jar going of messing up the show name, and Dave can get the payout at the end of every month. How about that? Whatever we have to pay into it, you get to take home after that. How about that?
Sounds good.
Fair enough. All right, sounds good. Anyways, I believe it was Bill and I that discussed this the other day, but Dave Portnoy, who is the owner of Barstool Sports, is being brought on for Big Noon Kickoff, which of course is Fox Sports's, counter program to College Game Day on Saturday mornings to start, college football Saturdays. And when this was initially announced, and Portnoy did go on to confirm it himself on Twitter, it was very much seen as a counter to like Pat McAfee, right? Like somebody that, brings a different type of content experience to the table, somebody that's not afraid to be controversial, all those kind of things that I think check the boxes of what McAfee and what Portnoy obviously are. But I was reading something over the weekend of John Orend of Puck News writing about this, who has insights into the Big Ten. It seems to be that they're also looking at this as Portnoy being kind of the Big Ten fanboy equivalent to what Paul Feinbaum is in the SEC. And there's belief from Fox Sports executives, according to this story written by John Orend of Puck News, that could potentially help sway opinions of the Big Ten when it comes to things like the college football playoff conversation. This is something that I'm not quite sure is going to work out the way that Fox Sports is intending for it to. Again, I don't doubt that Portnoy will go up there and obviously, pump up the Big Ten. Now, he is a Michigan grad, so him saying things positive about Ohio State may be the hardest thing to accomplish here, but I have no doubt that he's going to go up there and obviously pump up the Big Ten and tout them as the best conference and all those kind of things. I don't really think it's something that's going to sway the overall opinion of what the Big Ten Conference is. And I don't know how much Paul Feinbaum sways the national narrative around the SEC. I think the narrative already exists, and Paul Feinbaum's just somebody that continues to push it forward. But I don't think he's the end-all, be-all when it comes to people's overall perception of what the SEC is and why they think it's better or worse or whatever it may be. So I don't know if hiring a guy like Portnoy for Big Noon Kickoff accomplishes what you want it to accomplish, and I don't doubt he's going to go up there and crap all over the SEC whenever given the opportunity to try and push the narrative of the Big Ten forward a little bit more. But again, I don't believe that Paul Feinbaum is the reason why people look so favorably on the SEC. I think he just reinforces the narrative that's already out there. And look, the Big Ten's already a strong enough conference, right? They've won the last 2 national championships. And heck, in the past 2 years, the SEC hasn't even played in the national championship game. Like, that should be a strong enough argument. And I get why they're going about this, because from top to bottom, I would attest that the Big Ten is not quite as strong as the SEC. Now, again, at the very tippy top, sure, you can say Ohio State and Penn State may be better than Georgia and Texas right now. We saw, obviously, Ohio State beat Texas last year, and they're going to have an opportunity to do that again coming up week number 1. I do think, though, that middle ground of the conference where, again, we talk about South Carolina existing in that, 5-10, 5-12 is a lot more competitive and a lot deeper than, say, the middle part. And, again, they have 18 schools, so maybe you say, the 5-12 or 14 in the Big Ten. Compared to the SEC, I think the middle part of the conference is stronger for the SEC than it is the Big Ten, which I think, again, can go to reinforcing the narratives that we have about these conferences, that the SEC slate is tougher than the Big Ten slate or whatever it may be. Regardless, I think Portnoy will bring some different viewers to the Big Noon Kickoff audience. Certainly that younger crowd, right? And every TV executive is fighting tooth and nail to try and figure out how to get more 18 to 35-year-olds to watch their program. I think Game Day did a really good job in bringing in a guy in McAfee that quite literally directly appeals to that younger audience better than perhaps anybody in the sports media realm. And Barstool Sports, which, again, Portnoy presides over, does the same kind of thing. Now, that's the company itself in terms of the actual content. I don't know how, and Portnoy does that himself, obviously, but I'm interested to see how much he himself can sway any of that audience towards watching Fox as their preferred pregame show over College Game Day. Because here's the thing about Game Day, because it came first. It's been around for, 30-plus years at this point in time. You have so many people that are just legacy viewers of that show that it's all you've ever known, it's all you've ever watched, to where, you don't want to stray from that. Right? No matter what Big Noon Kickoff gives you over here, you're a Game Day person because you've always watched it. I'm that way myself, right? College Game Day for the longest time was the only true Saturday pregame show going on in college football. And, yeah, when you have the shows like Big Noon Kickoff come along over the years, I've checked in a time or two, or I'll watch the last couple of minutes if I'm getting set to watch a noon game on Fox, but I've never actually sat down and watched a full episode of Big Noon Kickoff because I'm just used to College Game Day. It's what I'm comfortable with. Pretty much the same cast of characters as theirs has been over the years. Obviously, Lee Corso going to retire after week 1 this year, but it's what I know. It's what I'm familiar with, and I don't feel the need to change. Right? And again, I fall right in that demographic of 18 to 34 that all TV executives want watching their program. And again, I follow, Dave Portnoy on Twitter. I don't agree with everything that he says because, again, he has a share of controversies, but it's not something that's going to draw me to Big Noon Kickoff. It's not something that if he's, pounding the drum for the Big Ten is going to sway my opinion of the conference necessarily, but that seems to be the angle that Fox Sports is hoping for when it comes to bringing him onto their show. So we'll see what happens, and I don't know, see if it does maybe change some people's opinions on the Big Ten compared to the SEC. That is 2 hours in the books, 1 more hour to go. We'll get back into the quarterback conversation of what each respective all-SEC quarterback has around them returning and expected production and all those kind of things, as well as why I am getting more and more high on the Florida Gators this upcoming season as a team that could potentially surprise people in college football. That's all coming up. It is the halftime show. It's Alright and Captain Dave on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in, halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, with you here on your Monday on the game. Run back through some of the major things that happened over the weekend. Starting off, as we anxiously awaited on Friday evening. Cut number one here, Dave. This happened.
How long we all here for? After a lot of prayer, long talk, and kept it out. I'm proud of now that I beat the team and I did in the football career. The University of South Carolina.
That, of course, Landon Duckworth, the 2026 four-star quarterback out of Jackson, Alabama, officially recommitting to the Gamecocks on Friday night, something we've been following for a while now. And South Carolina was leading the way for the stretch there going into Friday as it was down to them in Auburn. But again, you kind of never know what's going to happen, especially at the last minute with these kind of things. So good to see that Duckworth recommits to South Carolina, and Carolina puts themselves in a really good position when it comes to the quarterback room for the future, right? Now, again, Sellers is the quarterback here. As long as Sellers wants to be the quarterback here, whether it be 1 season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, whatever it may be, we'll certainly take that. Now, again, if Sellers has a really strong year this year, hopefully that means that Carolina is good, and he skirts off the NFL after that. That's okay, because you'll have had a really good second year as a starter that he can, leave his legacy with. And if that happens, then you're looking at next year, assuming, I always have to put this out there, assuming Duckworth does stay committed, because you do always have to throw out the caveat that, hey, he could potentially, flip again or change his mind or whatever, though it seems like South Carolina is a strong leader for everything to stay in place between now and now in December. So assuming he signs in December, then you'd have a quarterback room that consists of Air Noland, another 4-star prospect, coming out of high school that was previously at Ohio State, a guy in Cutter Woods that, based on what he's done so far through spring practice and everything is maybe seen as a higher value than the 3-star that he was coming out of high school. And now a guy in Landon Duckworth, another 4-star kid, coming out of the high school ranks. I think you would say that's about as good of a quarterback situation as you could have in terms of guys that have not started yet in college football, if it does indeed come to that. Where, again, you'd love to have Sellers for a couple more years, though there's no guarantee on that, certainly. And star ratings don't mean everything. But if you have 2 4-stars and a guy in a 3-star that is Cutter Woods, that's a winner coming from the high school ranks, that's already turning a lot of heads in a short time on campus here in Columbia, you feel like to be a pretty good situation. Now, again, when you start maneuvering and do the math on quarterbacks, it's impossible to figure out what's going to happen in 2 to 3 years now with who stays and who transfers and all those kind of things. But you would feel like you at least have a very solid quarterback competition going into the 2026 spring if those are your 3 options and Sellers isn't coming back for first, third year as a starter. So again, that's a long way down the road. A lot of football to be played between now and then and decisions to be made and all those kind of things. But a big get for South Carolina to recommit Landon Duckworth, and again, hopefully hang on to him as you navigate through the next couple months and lead up to early signing day. And that's a big commit outside of the state as well. We talk about how good Beamer and company are in terms of recruiting within the Palmetto State, but when you go out there and grab these big guys from the DMV, from Alabama, from these other hotbeds of talent, that goes a long way. And again, Carolina putting together a strong 2026 class with still more room to add to it. I believe I saw on Friday also there was another welcome home, if I remember correctly, that we have not gotten the official name for as of yet, which we'll certainly keep an eye on. Elsewhere in the sporting world, yesterday, Scotty Scheffler picking up the win at the Open Championship at Royal Portrush. Cut number 6 here, Dave. Scotty Scheffler giving his feelings on what it was like to win the Open.
I think so. I mean, being able to walk up 18 with the tournament in hand is a really tough thing to describe. It's a really cool feeling. I have a lot of gratitude towards being able to accomplish something like this. It's taken a lot of work, and not only a lot of work, but it takes a lot of patience. And I mean, it's a high level of focus over 72 holes of a tournament. And this was, I felt like one of my best performances mentally. We did a really good job of staying in it all week. Like I said, to only have one double, or really only one over par hole over the last 36 holes of a major championship is, that's how you're able to win these tournaments, just being able to do stuff like that. And it takes a high level of focus. And, Teddy and I did a really good job this weekend of being committed to what we're doing and, holding some key putts when I needed them.
Again, he was kind of operating in a league of his own the entire weekend. Second through like 9th or 10th was only separated by a couple strokes, but Scotty just truly running away with it there in the final round on Sunday as he nets yet another major victory in his very young professional career in the world of golf. Again, he's 9 days younger than me and has accomplished far more than I'll ever accomplish in my life. And that's certainly neat to follow and neat to see. And I brought up this stat earlier that was presented following his win yesterday, that the separation in days between his first major win and now his fourth major win is the exact same separation between Tiger Woods' first major win and his fourth major win. Now, again, we're not saying that he is Tiger Woods, because the impact of Tiger Woods in the game of golf stretched far beyond what was actually happening on the golf course. And again, you can read and watch documentaries and all these kind of things about what Tiger Woods meant to the game of golf. So I'm not saying he has the same profound effect on the sport that Tiger has had, but he is entering that level of dominance that we saw from Tiger Woods in his heyday back there in the early to or late 90s, early into mid 2000s as well. And again, the point I brought up earlier, golf is one of those sports where I feel like dominance is maybe appreciated more than any other, right? Because in football, baseball, basketball, we quickly start turning on the teams that are too good for too long, where golf, I don't think is the same case, where I feel like we kind of appreciate and witness, like, wow, I can't believe this guy's playing at this high of a level for this prolonged, period of time. And that's kind of what we're in the midst of right now when it comes to Scotty Scheffler and in the golf career that we're seeing unfold before our eyes. And that's something that I think is going to be fun to follow over the course of the next couple of years, and however long he is at the top of his respective golf game, where, again, he's just truly establishing himself as the best in the world, and doesn't look like that's going to be changing any time soon. Last week, of course, was SEC Media Days out in Atlanta. We certainly enjoyed being there on scene, getting to talk to the players, the coaches, and obviously a lot of great people that cover college football across the entire media landscape. And as we move away from that, starting tomorrow, you're going to have the ACC Media Days as well as the Big Ten Media Days getting rolling across the country, as well as we'll hear from the coaches, players, and, of course, the commissioners as well. Probably touch on a lot of the same hot-button issues that we talked about so much last week at SEC Media Days. I mean, every coach was asked about the college football playoff and the format. Every coach was asked about the 8 or 9 game schedule, and I imagine those kind of things will filter their way into these other respective conference media days events as well. I think what I'm most intrigued by is the opening statements of commissioners, right? Because this has kind of turned into, especially with how much change has gone on in college football these past couple of years, have turned into a bit of a one-upsmanship, right? A bit of a you-know-what measuring contest, it seems like, with the commissioners of these conferences, and touting their own conferences while also trying to assert dominance over the others, right? We saw it from Greg Sankey responding to what Yormark said the week before. I feel like we're going to hear it from Petiti responding to what Sankey had to say, Phillips responding to what everybody had to say. Like, these conference commissioners are always trying to get their message across and obviously tout the success of their own respective conferences, which, again, is their job at the end of the day. And we're in a unique spot here right now where I didn't think many expected to be, where we enter into media day discussions where the SEC and the Big Ten are still not seeing eye to eye when it comes to the formatting of the college football playoff. Again, it seemed like early on in the offseason that both sides were fully invested for the multi-AQ model with 4 + 4 + 2 + 2 + 1. And then the SEC kind of looked at it and said, wait a minute, based off the numbers here, if we go with a more open format, which is 5 and 11, that will allow us the opportunity to get even more teams in to the college football playoff, which is the argument that they're now making, though the Big Ten doesn't seem to be wanting to budge from the multi-AQ model. How this gets resolved, we don't know. Greg Sankey talked about it plenty last week. The deadline is December 1st. Will we get there? Will we not? Who knows? But I'm sure Tony Petitti will have a lot to say about it in terms of, what exactly the Big Ten's trying to push, what they're trying to accomplish, and what that means for their conference as well. On the ACC side of things, is this maybe the least volatile? The conversations around the conference have been going into a season, because it seems like the past couple of years the conversations have been about trying to escape conference. Was it last year, the year before, we had the 7 teams that were trying desperately to get out? That's cooled a lot. Seems like everybody for the time being is content with where they're at in the ACC and know that they're locked into these grant of rights. So perhaps more of the focus this time around will be on the on-field product, though I feel like Jim Phillips, like Sankey last week, is certainly going to have to answer plenty of questions in terms of the 8 to 9 game schedule, because that is something that, the ACC also does, like the SEC, where you only play 8 conference games and 4 non-conference games. And again, I've said it before, I advocate for uniformity across all the major conferences. Whether we'll get there or not, we'll have to see. But I imagine Phillips will also give his take on what he believes to be the best format for the college football playoff, which I would probably lean towards being that 5 and 11 model as well, even though, the ACC and the Big 12 voices don't matter nearly as much as the SEC and the Big Ten's voices do. So those kind of things to watch out for this upcoming week. Of course, we'll hear from, Ryan Day. We'll hear from Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney has already been talking. They did a presser at the end of last week, which I may get to a little bit coming up tomorrow, and some of the things that he talked about as they're already kind of doing their pre-camp assessments for the Clemson Tigers. So we'll hear from Dabo coming up this week, as well as some of the players and all those that we expect to be factors in the college football playoff conversation all year long as the 2025 season does roll along. I want to get back into looking at the all SEC quarterbacks and what their respective situations are. Who's got it easy, who's got it hard, and where does Lenore Sellers fall in that? We'll dive into that all coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Captain Dave on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Dang it, Dave, I did it again. There's another $1. You'll get that at the end of the month, I guess.
Well, I can pay my rent.
There you go. Well, I think it's going to take a lot of name mess-ups to probably equate to that much, but a little bit helps, I guess. We'll see. Anyway, it is the halftime show. Tirehead, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Monday of the game. Again, Bill Gunner out this week. We'll get him back next week and get his thoughts on whatever goes down this week. Hey, maybe we'll finally get the phase-on ruling this week. Who knows? It was 1 week ago that Coach Beamer did say he had a lot of confidence that something was going to be coming soon. I wish we could get a better definition of what soon meant, because I feel like we've been talking about soon in the phase-on ruling for quite a while now. And that kind of leads me into something I want to loop back around to. When we look at the 3 respective quarterbacks that made the all-SEC preseason team, which is Lenore Sellers, first team, Garrett Nussmeier, second team, and Arch Manning, third team, they're all entering very different situations when it comes to resources around them, right? And for one, I was surprised that Sellers ended up being first team. I thought he'd probably be like second team, but everybody around the conference seems to value him highly enough, which is a great honor, obviously. But he's got a more challenging situation around him offensively compared to the other quarterbacks with the respective teams in the SEC. And it really starts with the running back situation. Because, again, we're sitting here now 41 days away from kickoff, not knowing for sure if Rasul Faison is going to be eligible to play the season or not. And that drastically alters the thoughts on the running back room, because you have bodies in there, certainly, with Oscar Attaway, Isaiah Augusta, Jordan Howell, Matthew Fuller, all guys that are capable of playing. To what level and how good, we don't fully know for all those guys yet. You feel like Oscar Attaway can carry a decent amount of the load, but he's never been the feature back in any offense before in his college football career. So that's a huge undertaking that you aren't 100% sure of, as opposed to Rasul Faison, who has been that guy from his time at Utah State. So you have uncertainty at the running back spot. You have an offensive line that you're replacing all pretty much, from what we know right now, your entire interior, basically. We'll see if, Casey Henry wins the right tackle spot or not. But I think the only guy you're 100% certain on returning as a starter is left tackle Josiah Thompson. So you're replacing most of your offensive line. You're hoping that your receiving core takes another step forward. And again, there's a lot of promise for Harbor and for Mazio Bennett. Certainly these freshmen coming in that are being talked about a lot, but you don't know for sure to what degree those guys are going to be able to go out there and perform. So, and we'll loop tight into there as well. You've seen good things from Michael Smith and Brady Hunt. Jordan Dingle's had some catches when he was at Kentucky, but nobody you would say is a superstar at that position either. So a lot of unknown and uncertainty around Lenore Sellers on offense, which I think puts that much more on his back and much more of a load on him to carry with this offense coming up this year, which maybe that's what endears people to him so much, is that, hey, we know he's not going to have as much help around him, but that could potentially show you just how good he is, that despite not having all the resources available to him that some of these other quarterbacks have, he can still go out there and be really, really successful. Again, it's very hard to compare someone to Cam Newton, because he was truly a one-of-one and somebody that I will always say is the greatest college football player for that single season that I think we've ever seen, because he drug a team of less than talented players to a national championship. I don't know if Sellers is on that level. Maybe at the end of the season we're having a different conversation, but you have to be extra special to be compared to a guy like Cam Newton. But maybe that's how people see him. It's like, hey, this is a Cam Newton-esque guy that can take a team of guys that maybe aren't thought of as the best as their individual units and help drag them to, or carry them to, drag's not the right word, carry them to more success than they otherwise would have with any other quarterback. You compare that to the other situations for a guy like Garrett Nussmeier, who's going to be returning 2 out of his top 3 running backs with Caden Durham and Caleb Jackson. Now, this was a LSU team that last year did struggle to run the ball. They were dead last in the SEC when it came to rushing, despite having a really good offensive line. So that is something they're looking to obviously improve on this year, and maybe by having 2 of those 3 guys back, that will certainly help them out. Speaking of the offensive line, by the way, they do lose 4 of those starters, but they have a lot of experience there in terms of starts elsewhere or starts at LSU that they're going to be leaning on. Though, again, you never know what's going to happen when you're putting out a new group of 5 there with the offensive line. And perhaps the best thing that he has going for him is his receiving core. He's going to be returning the lead receiver in Aaron Anderson from a year ago, as well as adding in Barrion Brown, who was a big play guy at Kentucky these past couple of seasons. So he's got a lot of resources at his disposal to work with. And again, I think in the eyes of a lot of people, especially when you look at scouting reports and all those kind of things, Garrett Nussmeier is already seemingly the most pro-ready quarterback of anybody in college football for this upcoming year, and could potentially hear his name called as the #1 overall pick if he has a good enough season. So I think he goes in with a lot of help around him in the resources that he has available in that offense down there in his second full year as a starter down there at LSU. And then you look at Arch Manning, who, again, let's be honest, it is generous to deem someone to be a third-team All-SEC without a large sample size to fall back on, right? He had a start against Mississippi State and was the Louisiana Monroe last year. Is that the best indication of how somebody's going to be? No. He came in situations in the over the course of the year with goal lines and short yardage and those kind of things. He had an opportunity to maybe take the reins against Georgia and didn't really do that. But the upside for him is still very, very high. Again, 5-star kid from a legacy family like the Mannings, and he has a lot of help around him as well when you look at that Texas offense. Quintravian Wisner is perhaps the best returning running back in the SEC, 1,000-yard guy from a season ago that's going to get a lot of carry this upcoming season as well. Yes, you do lose the top 3 receivers from a year ago, highlighted by Matthew Golden, who, of course, went to the Packers, but you look at 2 young promising guys in Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore, who were highly touted guys coming out of high school that even in limited roles a season ago because of where they sat on the depth chart, still had a lot of production as those 2 guys combined for 900 yards and 9 touchdowns. And you would assume we're kind of stepping into those new roles at the respective top of their wide receiver group down there in Texas. So a lot more proven help around those kind of guys compared to what Sellers has here. Not saying that these groups can't step up, not saying that a Nick Harbor or Mazio Bennett or Jared Brown can go out there and have 1,000 yards. We just haven't seen quite enough of it to know for sure that that's going to happen. And again, the phase-on situation is its own thing that you feel a lot better if you do finally get the thumbs up or at least the thumbs down to know what the situation is, as opposed to things continuing to be up in the air, as well as having to wait and see on the offensive line. Now, again, all 3 of these quarterbacks have questions on the offensive line, given what they lost from a season ago and what they're having to replace. So that's something to keep an eye on with all those guys. They're certainly. So those are your 3 quarterbacks that are representing the respective All-SEC teams against Lenore Sellers, your first-team All-SEC quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, your second team, and then Arch Manning, your third team. There's one guy that did not make one of these lists, though, that I'm getting more and more high on, especially after getting to see him in person and hearing the conversations coming away from SEC Media Days. And when you do the deep dive into this team, I feel like they could be prized to surprise a lot of people this upcoming season. I'll tell you who that is coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Captain Dave along with you on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, David Dare, Captain David Dare, along with you here on your Monday on the game, rolling through. Looks very hot outside. I'm not looking forward to going out in the sweltering heat once the show's wrapped up here in just a little bit. But we are bouncing around the SEC and talking a lot of quarterbacks today. Again, I just kind of highlighted there in the last segment, the situations around Sellers, the situation around Nussmeier, and the situation around Arch Manning, and what maybe we can expect from their respective quarterbacks that are representing the first, second, and third team preseason all SEC. One guy that I thought could have potentially made an appearance on this list last week was DJ Lagway and the Florida Gators. He's somebody that I think has an extremely high upside when you talk about his abilities and what he showed last year when he was healthy. Did deal with some injuries a year ago. And kind of my one takeaway from last week was this garnering and building belief that Florida could surprise a lot of people. And look, I'm a card-carrying, anti-Florida person as much as the next guy. I hate the color orange. They've been a thorn in my side as a sports fan for a very, very long time, being a Georgia alum and all those kind of things. But being in this job, you have to call it as you see it sometimes. And I feel like what I'm seeing out of Florida and DJ Lagway specifically makes me believe that they could really surprise a lot of people. I mean, they were 6th in the SEC preseason media poll, so I'm not the only one that's thinking this. And much like South Carolina, success is going to rely a lot on what Illinois Sellers does. Same thing with Florida. If DJ Lagway has an incredible season, Florida themselves could have a very, very strong season as well. And Billy Napier, last week when he took to the podium at Media Days, talked about the belief that DJ Lagway creates in this team.
Yeah, DJ is, look, I think what's impressed me with DJ is how he has handled success. We knew DJ before he dominated Texas high school football his senior year. He became the Gatorade National Player of the Year, right? So seeing the humility, seeing how he treated people, how he embraced his role in that community on that team, the steadiness. I think his parents obviously provided a great example there. But he did the same things last year as he started to kind of become have a bigger role on the team, right? So the other thing I would say is just the competitor on game day is really unique. I think his ability to block out all the external factors and really get consumed with leading the team, playing, winning football, executing, and we built around the guy. There's no question. Players want to play with DJ. We built his class around that, and certainly some of these guys that are in the rookie group were a part of that as well.
So one thing that Lagway has going for him, and he talked about this last week, we had some fun with him talking about, I have, my aura is what really kind of stands out about me, and how much aura factors, varies depending on who you're talking to, certainly. But he's somebody that's very confident in his abilities and what he can do on the field, and that's something that can obviously resonate with your teammates. But Napier talks about building around him. And again, as I went through the respective offensive situations of Sellers, Nussmeier, and Arch Manning, again, those guys do have some areas of concern, particularly when it comes to the offensive line for all three of those teams. And again, you have help at receiver with Texas and LSU. Same thing with the running back situation. But, not everybody kind of has all three major boxes, or not everybody has all the boxes checked, I feel like, on offense in terms of help at the running back spot. That's guaranteed. Help at the receiver spot, that's guaranteed, and help at the help at the offensive line as well. But when I look at DJ Lagway and the Florida Gators, he's got a lot of promising things around him in that offense that, again, kind of reinforce my belief in what this Florida team can be. You look at a guy like Jaden Ball, who's returning as a true sophomore at running back, who last year, and who was splitting reps with Montel Johnson or Montreal Johnson in the running back room there, but he really came on. And when they went on that stretch run at the end of the year where they won 5 out of the last 7 games, he really saw an uptick in performance, particularly getting more carries, had a couple of 80-plus yard games in there, some touchdown runs. He really kind of came into his own in the back half of his freshman year as a running back there at Florida, and you expect him to be even that much better this upcoming season. When you talk about the offensive line, where again Carolina's replacing 3 to 4 starters on their offensive line, or looking at 3 to 4 different stars in their offensive line. You look at Texas and Florida; they're both replacing 4 starters on their offensive line from each of those teams. Texas and LSU, not Texas and Florida. Florida is returning 4 offensive linemen. They perhaps have the best center in all of the SEC, maybe one of the best in all of college football, in Jake Slaughter. That was an offensive line that in and of itself did a really good job a year ago in protecting whatever quarterback, whether it be Lagway or Graham Mertz. They only gave up 20 sacks on the year. And over the course of those final 7 games, where, again, they won 5 of them, they averaged 178 rush yards per game. Like, that was an offensive line unit that got better as the season went along. And, again, they're returning most of that production this upcoming year. And, again, I didn't really talk about this as much with those other quarterbacks, but Florida also has a lot of returning production on defense. And that was a defense that over the course of the final 7 games, again, winning 5 of them, only surrendered more than 20 points twice. That was in the 2 losses to Georgia and Texas. So it really just seems like the Florida team, much like Carolina, surged at the right time last year, has a lot of momentum going into the offseason. And I'm not saying they're going to make the college ball playoff. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and win the SEC or the national championship, but they stand, based on what we're looking at here, to be a lot better than they were a season ago. Again, Napier was able to hold off the people calling for his job. And again, in a place like Florida, the second you start to struggle, those calls are going to ramp right back up with people saying, fire him, get rid of him. So you're never too far away from those conversations, certainly. But I think they are positioned well. And again, if Flagway can stay healthy, by the way, I fully believe that if Flagway doesn't get hurt in that game against Georgia, where they have to play like their 3rd or 4th string quarterback, then the Gators probably win that game because of how tight it was all the way down to the end. And Lagway missing most of that game obviously hurt them. So you have the ability to be a team that could really turn things around and surprise a lot of people this upcoming year. Because, again, the returning production, what you have in a quarterback really, really should be a reason for people to get excited down there in Gainesville. And, again, much like the SEC media poll, I have them as my number 6 team. And, again, this isn't me rooting for them, and I hate Florida as much as the next guy. But what I see out of this team is a lot of belief and a lot of optimism based on what they have coming back and what they have around DJ Lagway that could prove to be very, very vital in terms of this team being better this upcoming year. And who knows? I mean, we could be talking about Napier as like a coach of the year in the SEC if this team's around that 8 to 9 win mark and potentially putting pressure off of his back this upcoming year. But that's kind of one of my main takeaways from media days last week was just this garnering belief and this garnering momentum that I feel like Florida is getting going into the season that DJ Lagway is really kind of the catalyst for, because it all starts with the quarterback. And physically speaking, he's one of the more impressive quarterbacks that I did see in person last week. And if he can stay healthy, then Florida has the opportunity to do a lot of good things this upcoming year. But we'll see. Again, that's speculation at this point, just kind of, going off of the information that we have as of right now. And we'll see if they end up living up to that. And DJ Lagway can be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC in 2025. We'll come back. We'll wrap up today's edition of the Halftime Show. The Athletic has released their all-geezer team for 2025 of guys that you can't believe are still playing college football, and one of them is a Gamecock. I'll tell you who that is coming up next. It is the Halftime Show. It's our head, Captain Dave, along with you on your Monday on the Game. Well, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Captain Dave wrapping things up here on your Monday on the game before we hand things over to Jay and Terry for today's edition of the post-game show. Stuart Mandel of The Athletic and Sam Conn Jr. The past couple years have been putting out what they deem to be the all-geezer team because since COVID, we've had this extra year of eligibility that has allowed some guys to stay in college for longer than in previous iterations of college football. And now you mix in the Pavia ruling, which is allowing guys that play junior college ball to stay longer and longer. We have some pretty old players in college football. Dave, I'm sure you're familiar with how much eligibility has changed over the past couple of years. But if you want to take a guess, I want you to guess how old, on this list, that they have guys and what their respective first seasons of college football is. How far back do you think we go in terms of years of guys on this list and how long they've been around college football? You want to take a guess?
6.
So back to 2019?
Yeah.
There's a couple 2019ers on here, but you actually have to go back a little bit further.
Oh.
We have 3 players from 2018 on this list.
Wow.
So players that began their college careers, whether at their current schools or other schools, back in 2018, still playing college football. You have Solomon Tuilepa Uipupu from Montana, who began his career at Southern Cal on this team. You also have David Reese, who is a linebacker at Syracuse on this list, as well as Logan Taylor, a linebacker at Hawaii. All those guys, think about what you were doing back in 2018, and those guys were starting their college careers and are still currently there. One guy that everybody's familiar with on this list, of course, is none other than Luke Doty, who, it's really funny, they list him as all-purpose because they couldn't quite figure out what to categorize him as. Right? Because you had a guy that came in as an athlete, has played quarterback, has switched to wide receiver, has played on special teams, now is still kind of a quarterback / wide receiver, but is really kind of a little bit of everything on this team. And look, he's a team-first guy. You tip your cap to him because he never transferred. He loves the University of South Carolina. But as they point out in the article, he's going to be 24 in October. He'll be one of the older players in all of college football. But again, very much a beloved member of the South Carolina football team that has the distinction of, I think this is last year of eligibility, right? Again, last year he went to media days. He took part in the senior day activities for the final home game last year with the thought of, oh, hey, this is the last time we're going to see Luke Doty, only for him to have the opportunity to come back for yet another season, which I think this is the final one. I think this is his COVID year of eligibility finally being used, and Luke Doty won't have any eligibility coming up in 2026. A couple other players on this list which are significant to point out. You have Zach Calzada, who is the anticipated starting quarterback for the Kentucky Wildcats, who played his first season of college football all the way back in 2019 with Texas A&M. He, of course, was the quarterback when A&M upset Alabama all the way back in 2021. That was the first time a Saban assistant in Jimbo Fisher had ever upset Nick Saban. Since then, he's been toiling around Incarnate Word for the past couple of years, where he did put up a very, very impressive year last year, but is coming back into the fold in the SEC, where he'll be 25 this upcoming season, and we'll see if his second run in the SEC can be any better than his first run can. Funny enough, there's quite a few A&M quarterbacks on this list. You have Haynes King, who also started his career off in A&M back in 2020 and from 2020 to 2022, has since been at Georgia Tech these past couple of years. And again, for those that maybe don't watch a ton of Georgia Tech football, and that's okay, I don't blame you, you saw Haynes King earn a lot of respect last year for really putting his nose down and being that gritty, tough quarterback that went toe-to-toe with Georgia last year and darn near upset the Bulldogs in that wild 8 overtime game out there in Athens. But yes, he's still playing college football. Again, I think I think this is last year of eligibility, much like Luke Doty, kind of using that final COVID year to have one last shot. There's a starter for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And not to be left out, we have yet a fourth A&M quarterback. Excuse me, that's a Baylor quarterback. Sorry about that. And Jared Zeno, that is now at A&M, but started his career at Baylor back in 2019. Though he's not expected to start, he'll be the backup to Marcel Reed, who of course came on as a freshman a season ago out there in College Station. And one other guy, you may remember this name, John Emery Jr., who's currently with the Texas San Antonio Roadrunners. He was on that Joe Burrow National Championship LSU team back in 2019. And the funny thing is, you know, he was a five-star running back recruit coming out of high school. Everybody wanted him. Georgia wanted him. Alabama wanted him. All these schools were in the running for John Emery Jr. before he ultimately chose to be a part of that LSU team. Again, he got some run alongside Clyde Edwards-Helaire en route to that national championship. But when you talk about a guy that was as highly touted coming out of high school as he was, his name has been around for far longer than just the seasons that he's played of college football. I remember hearing about this guy back in like 2017, 2018. So the name's been around for far longer that he's been in college, which makes him seem like, he's even that much older. It very much reminds me of, do you remember Michael Dyer that was on the 2010 Auburn team that won the national championship? He played college football all the way through 2014 because he ended up at Louisville in that season. But kind of a similar trajectory here with John Emery Jr. and still hanging around because his career has not quite panned out the way that he wanted to. Tore his ACL last season at the beginning of the season. And then I believe, according to the story, Brian Kelly said he was going to be retiring, but that obviously didn't end up being the case, as he's now at Texas San Antonio, as I believe this will also be his last year of eligibility. But there's a look at your all-geezer team when it comes to college football, as we are filtering out the COVID year guys. But I guess if the Pavia ruling continues to hold steady, then we're going to have a run of guys that have played junior college football that doesn't count against them anymore, that can stay in college for potentially even longer. So there you go. There's your look at your all-geezer team for college football in 2025. Luke Doty getting the distinction of being on that team this year. That'll do it for today's edition of the Halftime Show. Again, we'll get Bill Gunser coming back in here next week, but we'll dive into more things coming up tomorrow as the week rolls along, as we get you that much closer to the start of the college football season. Post-game show with Jay and Terry up next here on your Monday on the Game.